our guests' time so that, so that we honor Representative Parenti's time. And I think we were also going to have Representative Lindsay join us, but we'll watch for her to pop in here. But give me 1 minute here. Find my notes. Okay. So I'd like to welcome everyone for joining the Housing Task Force this evening, and a special welcome to Representative Jennifer Parenti. But before introducing her, I just want to provide a bit of info before we begin. The Housing Task Force purpose is to inform and engage members across the state to promote collective actions around housing issues as they are strongly aligned with the stated league position. The task force hopes to influence public policy and legislation at all levels through advocacy while speaking with one league voice. That one league voice speaks to legislation through our Legislative Action Committee. And tonight we do have those members, league members who serve on that committee representing housing issues. Kate and Joe and Kathy are our housing advocates with the Legislative Action Committee. So the league's position on housing states that it's the responsibility of all levels of government to provide equality of opportunity for education, employment, and housing for all persons in the U.S., regardless of their race, color, gender, religion, national origin, age, sexual orientation, or disability. Our speaker tonight is engaged in this work every day. Representative Jennifer Parenti is an Air Force veteran, former engineer, diplomat, community organizer, and a voting rights activist representing Colorado House District 19. She has dedicated her life to public service and safety and security of our country and her community. She was elected to the Colorado State House in 2022 to represent communities including Dacona, Erie, Frederick, Firestone, East Longmont, and surrounding areas. She serves on the agricultural, water, and natural resources and transportation, housing, which is one we're interested in, and local government committees during the legislative session. So Representative Parenti is focused on creating affordable housing opportunities for everyday Coloradoans. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Parenti for an update on housing bills.
Thank you, Trish, and thanks to the members of the league. I did want to acknowledge that my very dear friend in the legislature, Representative Mandy Lindsay, has been able to join us. So I just wanted to see if you wanted to do an introduction for her before we get started talking about the bills.
Sure, I'd love to, and welcome Representative Mandy Lindsay. We're happy that you're able to join us this evening. Representative Lindsay represents District 42 in Aurora. And she had worked as a legislative aide for Representative Jackson. And when Representative Jackson resigned to take a position in HUD, she won the vacancy election to fill her seat. So as her bio says, she started out almost drinking from a fire hose during her first session and came out, as she says, relatively unscathed. Having joined the Latino caucus, passed 12 bills, learned everything she could, took advantage of every opportunity given, and is now crafting legislation for this session to impact the people of House District 42. So Representative Lindsay, again, we welcome you and look forward to your information on the housing bills.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I don't know how long I'm just checking. I don't know how long you've scheduled for this. I'm in the middle of prepping for a bill, and so I'm going to stay for as long as I can. But you are in great hands with Representative Parenti.
All right, thank you. Well, if you like, we can get started with a little bit of an overview on some of the major pieces of legislation that have come through this session. I know as member of the League of Women Voters Housing Committee, you're probably as familiar, if not more familiar with most of these pieces of legislation than even we are. I did want to just reiterate that both Representative Lindsay and I serve on the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committees. Representative Lindsay is actually our esteemed vice chair. So she takes over from time to time. And I know that housing is a major, focus area and consideration for both of us. Some of the bigger bills, I've got a whole list of housing bills here in front of me, but some of the bigger ones that I think that we've looked at this session, that at least I'm most excited about, certain ones that have certainly come through the housing committee. You were speaking earlier about residential occupancy limits, which was signed into law earlier this morning. So we're super excited about that bill. Just cause for eviction, right? Another Latino caucus priority, and certainly one that we both supported. We're happy to support. First right of refusal for local governments to purchase older multifamily housing and turn that into affordable housing units. ADUs passed the House over the weekend. Let's see. One that I know is really of interest to people in my area was price gouging in the wake of a natural disaster. We saw that here in Boulder County. So we are very excited to see that go forward. And then there's two other bills that maybe are not on your horizon that I wanted to take an opportunity to speak about. One is a bill that I actually brought forth on behalf of members of my community that relates to consumer protections around home warranties. So specifically new home builds. We're having a major problem in my community with builders refusing to honor their warranties. It's a major consumer protection issue, and it becomes a housing affordability issue when you just leveraged every dime that you have to build a new house, and 6 months later you're facing $30,000-$40,000 in repairs that you can't afford and the builder is refusing to fix. So that is actually in the Senate tomorrow. Has its Senate committee hearing tomorrow, and we're excited to see that go forward. And then one of the bills that I'm most excited about that I think got very little attention in the housing space, it's House Bill 1057. It's called Prohibit Algorithmic Devices Used for Rent Setting. And this is actually a big deal. This is a huge problem. And so what it means is we've got software like internet companies out there that are selling services to major renters, like big corporate apartment complex owners, telling them, hey, this is the price that you can charge for your unit. And it's been proven that these algorithmic devices, these algorithmic programs, are actually driving the market up artificially, right? And there's so many landlords using these algorithms that it has actually become a form of a form of a monopoly, right, of sort of price fixing across the market. So I really wanted to point that out and give a tip of the hat to Representative Woodrow for bringing that piece of legislation forward. So I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's like 7 giant bills right there. There's a whole nother list, but happy to answer questions, or maybe give Representative Lindsay just a chance to kind of talk about her favorites in the group.
Thank you, Rep. Parenti. Yeah, some of mine overlap for sure. I will let you know, Northwest Aurora, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with it. It is one of the lowest income districts in the state, is one of the most diverse districts in the state. It's a wonderful place to live, and it also has its challenges. And one of those is, affordability, people being able to even have any kind of housing. A lot of tenants' rights issues come up in my district. So I just will let you know that a lot of my work deals in that tenant space, or figuring out how people can break into the housing market and become homeowners. So I too like Woodrow's bill about the using the thing for price fixing and creating monopolies, which is a problem. He does tremendous work in this space all the time. I worked on a bill with him last year on leases. So really excited about that. The for-cause eviction one is important, as well as that occupancy limit one. the city of Aurora a couple years back had tried to pass a law in the city saying that, you know, these arbitrary limits didn't need to stay. And because they are one of the ways that people can have affordable housing, it's where you are living with roommates, you are living with other friends, and they're not all physically, you know, biologically related. And that is one of the ways that people are able to survive the high cost of housing. So I'm thrilled, like we couldn't get it done in Aurora as a city. So I am so thrilled to see that bill pass on a statewide level. I have a bill that actually just passed through seconds today. Was that today? It might as well have been a million years ago. I can't even remember. And it was just this morning. But it is removing eviction filing fees. So when people are, you know, have been given a demand letter by their landlord, and their court proceedings have begun, people that are already struggling to pay rent will not have to pay this $80 fee to respond to the court hearing. And as I mentioned today on the floor, when you have an $80 bill or an $80 expense, when you are struggling and barely paying rent, it might as well be $800. And so wouldn't we rather that $80 go to the landlord rather than the court? And so obviously this is just trying to increase people's access to the justice system when we're dealing with these housing issues. Usually landlords have attorneys or know more about the system than the tenant does. So I'm really in love with that one. I'm really proud of that. Let's get it all the way through the Senate. I did sponsor a Senate bill that came through the House and it is passed. It's also dealing with this landlord tenant space, but it's about habitability. There are a lot of stories of tenants who have something broken, water leaking or pests, or no heat, that kind of thing. And there weren't defined timelines of when that had, okay, I love the cat. I'm such a cat person. Hello, Kitty. I love you. There in the law, it stated when you had to notify and when the landlord had to get back to you, but there was no defined time for when the landlord actually had to repair whatever they needed to. And so this codified that, and it just makes that relationship between the landlord and tenant more clear cut. People know exactly what their roles are. So very proud of those things. I mean, that's all talking about me, but I'm very proud of this work. I'm sure Brett Parenti will talk some more too. She's on a kind of an HOA bill that's been important. We hear a lot about HOAs in our committee. I happen to not live in one, so I don't have to deal with them, which they have some pluses and minuses, but there are a lot of concerns people have about HOAs. And, you know, slowly but surely, last year we passed some laws. This year we passed a few more to address these issues that we hear a lot about in our committee. So I will leave it there. Kick it back to Parenti or questions. I'm seeing some things happening here in the chat too, so.
It looks like Kate's been dropping links to a lot of the bills we've been talking about.
look at
Thank
that,
you
yeah.
for your help with that. Yeah, I mean, I didn't plan a lot of prepared remarks. I figured you all had questions that you wanted to ask about contents of the bills, or, you know, where the bills were and what you could do in terms of advocacy. And so, yeah, really happy to hear just your feedback on which bills are on your radar, and answer any questions that you have.
Right. Well, I'll start. I have a couple of questions. So the governor signed the U+2, I'll call it, because that's what they call it up here, the occupancy. So if the governor has signed that, what's the timeline for communities having to put that in place?
Yeah, typically it's somewhere in the August to September timeframe, but we'll have to pull up the specific bill to see if they set another,
I think
yeah.
it's July 1st.
Yeah, they do that sometimes. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm on the database for our bills to look to, so I'll have to, and she might pull it up faster.
And then while you're looking at that, the other bill I would bring up, and I don't have a number for it unless it might be 1313, but it's the whole density transit oriented.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about transit oriented corridors. It didn't even pop up on the list that we pulled from the website. And the answer to your previous question is July 1st, 2024.
Okay.
That's when it takes effect. So that's really fast. Yeah, let's talk about transit-oriented communities. So this passed the House this weekend.
Saturday.
We,
Sunday.
yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. You're good.
Time means nothing at this point. I don't know what day it is.
What month are we in?
Is it May yet?
I know. Yeah, this is a bill that I supported last year in its mega form and, you know, was happy to support again this year. That is going to encourage communities that meet specific criteria, and it really is our more urban corridors to infill their housing, right? To build up density along those transit corridors. I like this bill because it did take a bit more of a carrot and stick approach than last year's bill. It doesn't necessarily say that every community has to do this, but not doing it comes with consequences. And I think that's okay, like for us to have those conversations. I will say it's a bill that impacts Representative Lindsay's community a lot more than it does mine. So I'm gonna stop and give her a chance to comment on, you know, how she feels about the bill.
Yeah, I was always, or last year I was also in favor of, gosh, was it 213 Parenti? I can't remember, this very large bill dealing with land use. And so as we've seen this year, that bill has been kind of broken down into several other bills. I was supportive of 213 last year. So any of the things that are coming out of that as smaller bills, I'm in favor of as well. And actually, gosh, was 1313? Yeah, that's Judah and Woodrow. Rep. Judah happens to be my district neighbor, so we are, you know, part of the same community, and these things are very important as we are trying to solve the housing crisis issue in Aurora. Part of my district is right along 225 there. We have light rail. We have by this light rail station by Alameda, we have a huge swath of open land that's just sitting there with like a light rail station next to it. So it's very top of mind of number one, housing, so people can be housed. And then obviously in a community like mine, where not everybody has vehicles, it's important on main arteries that we've already constructed with infrastructure, that we are building housing there so that they can get to work or to school and not always having to rely on cars for transportation. So this to me is an important bill. I understand always wanting carrots versus sticks. I also of the mind that, you know, if people wanted to have worked on this, they might have already done it. And since they haven't, sometimes you have to use a stick and say, if you don't do this, then these are the consequences. And so that to me wasn't a deal breaker in this bill at all. I think we need to get very serious very quickly about addressing our housing needs. And this one is one of the 5 million pieces of the puzzle that help get to more affordable housing and make sure people are housed. So I was very happy to support this one.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, that as someone who represents more of a, you know, suburban, it's actually more exurban even type district, I was happy to support this bill as well. It does offer opportunities for even communities like mine to self-opt in to create more affordable housing, more denser housing, and with that comes a pledge of more state support to adding jobs to our communities, adding transit to our communities, which is something that we certainly have been looking for more help on. So.
Great, thank you. So let's open it up here. Specific bills, specific questions. Kathy, I see your hand up.
Hi, thanks. I'd like to continue the conversation about 1313 if we could a little bit. And thank you both for your work. You both are great and do some important things. So thank you. So now that the land use bill from last year has been kind of torn apart into pieces, we've been noticing that the pieces aren't necessarily fitting well together as separate pieces. So 1313 compared with, let's see, it's 1366, which is sort of more of a transportation, and then Senate Bill 174, which is the uh, the way that you go about planning for affordable housing in communities, the planning. We've noticed that there's different definitions, that there's different timelines, there's gaps, there's overlaps, and we're just kind of wondering where things are since there's only about 3 weeks left with these bills. So
Yeah.
I throw that out there.
Just to talk a little bit about the three that you mentioned, 1313, certainly is the one that's most developed, I would say. Senate Bill 174, as you said, that's the housing needs assessment bill. It's still in the Senate. We haven't had actually a really good look at it in the House. And then 1366 is going to be heard in our committee tomorrow, and it will go through significant changes. So I think you will see some more alignment there. I think it's a step back for that bill, unfortunately. It's going to have to be watered down quite a bit. But at least it gets us moving in the right direction. I don't know if Rep. Lindsay, you have anything more that you want to add?
No, I think you explained it well. I agree that I think this bill, it's moving forward in a form. Sometimes those things happen here where through amendments, it's, we kind of like it before it gets amended. But I think that this concept will live to fight another day. And sometimes that's important in chipping away on things, and you don't always get everything that you want immediately. So I'm happy to see this move forward, hopefully in the way that it's amended tomorrow. I don't know, I guess that's all I'll say about it. Can be
I think
frustrating.
I'm sorry, Rep. Lindsay. Just listening to you also made me think of something. I think that some of this discombobulation, this maybe lack of connectivity, it's also a symptom. It's a symptom, particularly within the House, of our inability to really work together well under the new rules that are in place for the House. And I think you're starting to see that affect legislation when we are unable to sit down as a committee and talk through these issues in advance and find the areas where there's disconnect between our bills and work those out in advance. It leads to weaker bills. It leads to less well thought out bills. And right now, the only way that we can have those conversations is through other parties. So in this case, through the governor's office. Right? We can't have those conversations with each other, but we can have them with the governor's office, and then the governor's office can have it with the other group. Right? And so it has changed the dynamic in our committee and in our caucus. And I do think that it is impacting the quality of our work in some areas. So.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think before the rules changed, we, had some plans for working groups over last interim where people interested in particular issue areas like housing, where those legislators would get together and kind of discuss ideas, what people were thinking of working on. And then you would kind of know what you're interested in, but also what colleagues are working on and where those places overlap. Trying to work out those things beforehand, before bills are introduced, but we have been under rules that have been quite detrimental to our process. And so it feels in a lot of ways like everybody's on an island, their own little island, trying to put out policy, but not being able to communicate in the way that we normally would like. So it's hurt us even in like for instance, I didn't even know all the housing bills that were really coming until they start coming to committee. It's not like we've all been talking about, hey, what are our priorities in the housing space? How can we work together or figure out this piece? And I think it has been detrimental to the process and led to some of the things that you're talking about.
Going forward, could there be such a thing as interim working groups where, sort of like the interim committees, but a little less formal than that, but just to talk through some of these things in a public space?
I think so. And I think we will see that hopefully this next interim. I think last year we were in quite like this limbo space of not knowing what was what and not wanting to violate like a consent decree. And so we were just, everything kind of was very quiet and shut down for a while. But I think now that we have, made it through the consent decree and we have the new law that came this year that's, been in action for, I don't know, a few weeks, a month or something, that now that we kind of know what's what, we can work within the confines of like what is now. And I think we will see some progress on that front this interim. At least I'm hoping, to do my best to make that so, because I felt I do not want to have another session in exactly the same way. I would like to improve the way that we can communicate and collaborate with each other.
I'm sorry, Joe has her hand up. Oops, you're muted, Joe.
Sorry. While ago, when we first started talking, you were mentioning the price gouging in rent declared disasters. And that is one of the bills that I've been working on. And it has been, I know you're both in the House and it's in the Senate now at this point. It's going to be heard maybe tomorrow on the Senate floor. It keeps getting laid over. Have you heard anything about why it is being laid over?
Joe, I haven't heard anything specific, but I can just tell you from our experiences in the House that there's a lot of reasons that bills get laid over, even bills that are supported. I had a bill where the vote count was close, but I knew I had enough votes, but we had a lot of absences for like a week. And the people I needed to be present to cast their votes were not around. And so we had to keep delaying until we had a good attendance day. So sometimes it can be that. Sometimes it can be part of a negotiation, in terms of, well, we'll hold off on this bill, or, we're not going to introduce this bill until this other bill clears. There can be those kinds of conversations sometimes. But I will say that it's not always a sign that things are wrong.
Thank you.
And I will just jump in to say, you reminded me of something with your question. And number one, I think, is it Joe? What is your cat's
Yeah.
name?
Joe, Vader.
Vader? Oh, perfect. Okay. But yeah, even when you ask that question, it reminds me of how the Senate is not far from our chamber at all. I mean, we could walk there in probably 100 steps, but in a way it's also like a whole other world. And we live in our House and they live in the Senate. And once something kind of leaves our purview and goes to the Senate, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with that bill. I haven't heard, and so you just bring that up of what an interesting place this is. If you're hyper focused on things while it's in front of you in the House, in committee or whatever, and then it goes to the Senate and you're like, I don't know, it's out there doing its thing. And, so that was just an interesting piece of that. I was like, wow, I really can't answer that question.
All right, how about any more questions? Housing. So how about how the league can best support your work? What ideas? I know the testifying and the writing of letters, responding to action alerts, but are there other things that you find maybe would be effective?
One thing that I've been having advocates and constituents do recently is, beyond reaching out to particular representatives, which of course is always, welcomed, is to reach out to other elected officials who will then reach out to those representatives, right? So like one of my housing bills is really struggling because the metro mayors have come out against it, but the county commissioners are for it. So it's like, it's got this kind of goofy dynamic. And so sometimes more effective than just reaching out to us is also reaching out to your mayor and saying, hey, this bill is important. Can we get the city to reach out to representatives, right? Because sometimes those voices weigh even more than individual constituents. Or reach out to, you know, the county and say, we really would love it if the county commissioners could take a position on this bill. Right?
Mhm.
Those voices are also very influential.
Yeah, I think obviously testifying, sending letters to legislators, always important. What Rep. Parenti highlighted there is important. And I think from even a more proactive aspect for like future sessions of, you know, letting us know the things that are on your mind in this space or things that you're hearing in your communities or your lives that sometimes can be the seed for a bill for us. So not only supporting bills that are already in action, but, you know, just being very open with us about issues that you're hearing, because that's where our bills come from, of a particular issue that we hear from constituents or a group like this that, you know, help us figure out what's top of mind for people and what we need to be prioritizing and working on. So I look forward to more, you know, engagement and feedback from you about what you'd like to see in the future as well, or what you're hearing, you know, in your own communities.
Great, thank you. Questions? Okay, well, then we don't want to tie up. Oops, I see Sherry.
I like the little noise it makes. It's like, boop.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, well, this question might be a little bit premature, but it's kind of for Beth and Kathy. And on Tuesday, I gave a kind of an overview of last month's housing task force with the planner and kind of the state of Colorado's housing situation. And it was very well received. And that's the kind of thing that I'm kind of spreading the word on what's happening here into our local league. But this question is really for, I have an association with League of Women Voters DC, and what they're trying to do, and I don't know if this task force is the place to really present this, and that's what the question is. But basically, they're trying to get resolutions signed by leagues throughout the nation to possibly support DC statehood. And we in Gunnison had a very nice presentation from Beth Hendricks, who is League of Women Voters DC, of course. And that was about a month ago. And it was explaining all about, you know, statehood in DC and so on. So what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I bring that information to League of Women Voters Colorado and possibly get these resolutions at least entertained and you know, maybe a presentation to you all and whatever. So that's basically the question I'm asking. And also, thank you very much for this extremely detailed legislative information on this housing task force, because it's just exactly what is needed to spread the word about the legislation that is happening right now. So if you could give me some guidance as to whether this committee is the place to start that resolution push that DC has asked Colorado to do, or would I be going straight to Beth Hendricks and League of Women Voters CO, or, you know, what's the deal?
Well, that's a good question, but I think going to Beth Hendricks, Sherry, would be the best place to start, because she kind of oversees all of the task forces work, and she may know whether it's this one or another one of the task forces that may be suited for. But Beth, I think, is a good place to start. And she's left our meeting already, so yeah, if you could, do you have her? I'll get in touch with you in terms of making sure you have contact info for her. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Joe, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was fortunate enough that one of my bills has already gone all through the House and the Senate and been signed by the governor. And it was the fire hardened building materials and real property. And although it's been signed by the governor, what do you see in the way of it actually being enforced?
Hold on, Joe. I'm actually pulling up the bill language just to see what it said specifically with respect to hardening. I think the biggest thing about it is that it takes, I don't want to say it takes power away from the HOAs, but so
It does.
I have a lot of I have a lot of concerns about HOAs and metro districts, and I do a lot of work in that space. I'm our legislative representative to the Metro District Task Force. I am on an HOA, another HOA bill this year. And so for me, like, that's the biggest thing, is just for an individual to be able to go back to their HOA and say, you can't prevent me from doing this, right? It's an individual empowerment. Do I believe that a state entity is going to crack down on HOAs? Probably not. I think it's going to be up to us to spread the word to individuals, right? That your HOA can no longer do this. Then the individuals themselves will be able to fight back against, for instance, a denial of an architectural review request. And if their HOA is unresponsive, they will have the ability to pursue a legal remedy, which is pretty much how this space is working now in terms of xeriscaping. So that's why I draw back on that experience.
Yeah, I live in Highlands Ranch, which is a special district, but we're bigger than a lot of cities. And I know there's a wooden fence going right up to my daughter's house. So I just wondered what power would happen. But you
bring up
said,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you bring up a good point about anytime we are passing legislation, like, we know generally what's happening. It's, you know, like, groups like yours generally know what's going on, but for the wider public, that's always an issue of, like, how do we get the word out about this new law, and how it impacts people? And I think that can be very difficult. I mean, I know this in the landlord tenant space of, like, how do tenants ever learn what their new rights are? And so the same with this is, you know, hopefully people that care about this work in these spaces are passing it along in HOAs, because you can't fight against something that you don't know that you have the right to fight against. And I was on a Xeriscape bill last year in HOAs that said HOAs cannot, like, prevent you or say that you cannot do xeriscaping for you know, like, beautification reasons. And I'm very proud of that, but I'm like, not everybody knows that's the case. People are just living their lives in their house and their HOA, and not everybody's looking at all the upcoming laws and things that passed this year. So, but I really did like this bill, you know, for fire prevention, because unfortunately I feel like it's just, this fire risk is not going away. And so we need to be doing everything we can to make sure communities are prepared for, you know, God forbid, when things happen, that we are just not creating tinderboxes in our neighborhoods. So.
And every day I get a red alert.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real threat here in Colorado, and it's not going away.
No. Oh, Kathy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things to follow up on that. I'm wondering if next session, if there could be something of a bill for a grant program to do some community organizing for letting renters know more about their rights. worked in some manufactured home communities for the last few years, and it's just really hard to get people to know what their rights are. And I think it needs to be done in the broader community of tenants, and really, the community organizing groups need funding to do that kind of stuff. So some sort of a grant program.
Yeah, I'd be totally down for that kind of thing because I feel that information gap is real, and it hurts people because they just don't even know what they don't know on the subject. And like I said, people are just going to work and getting kids to school, and they are not researching statute, which is fair. I get that. But I know even Representative Marvin and I were talking after hearing some habitability horror stories of, how do we make it easier for tenants to know in their lease exactly what their rights are, and what responsibility do we have as a state to, make sure that that's mandated or not. I know too, talking about with Rep. Beisnecker about language access in like the DOLA platform. So when people are going to state websites and seeing documents that deal with housing, that it's also in Spanish, for instance, when deals, he deals a lot in like the mobile home park space and has done really wonderful work there. Many people in that space don't know English, and they are super at a disadvantage because they can't even read the documents that are available. And so everything that we can do to make that information more accessible so that people are as informed as possible, is critical to this work. Absolutely.
I just want to add on to that is a conversation that I've been trying to have with a lot of different advocates and my fellow legislators, because I think it's a really important perspective that we have for all the work that we're trying to do. And whether you're talking about being an informed voter or an informed tenant or even an informed home buyer, being able to be informed and engaged is a luxury that most people don't have. And it's a symptom. It's a symptom of our economy. It's a symptom of our society that we are forcing most working families to work 2 jobs, right? To work even potentially more than 2 jobs if you've got 2 members of your household working multiple jobs, right? And until we fix that underlying issue, we cannot expect people to be full up on what their tenant rights are, or full up on their homeowner rights, or full up on what their ballot petitions mean. Right? Like this is a symptom, and some would argue an intentional symptom of the economic culture that we have created. And we have to do a lot more work to try to take some of the economic pressure off of working families so that they have the time to breathe and actually read and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, totally agree. Not really a housing thing, but compounding on that, we've noticed that there have been a lot of tax credits this session, and understand why we're trying to get funnel money, but if it's not refundable, one, it doesn't do low income folks a lot of good, and I've been in a position to try to convince people to file tax returns for child credits and things like that, and it just seems that it's a big barrier to be able to get one to be able to get the tax credits, and 2, to even know what you qualify for. And I haven't seen a platform that goes through all the tax credits, or some sort of an app where you can put in your information and just get a list of what you qualify for. It's just, I mean, you have to be totally informed, or you have to go through a third party that can explain it to you. And it's just, it's a wonderful idea to offer these tax credits, but there are so many barriers getting there. And I think reducing those barriers would be great.
Yep. A quick note on that. I also sit on the Joint Technology Committee, and this is a conversation that we have had with the Department of Revenue and Health and Human Services, and even CDEC, which is the Department of Early Childhood Education, I guess, where we are talking about bringing more synergy into these processes. So for instance, when I file my tax return, it will tell me, hey,
Mhm.
did you know you might be eligible for these credits? Or when I filed for SNAP benefits, it says, hey, based on your household size and income, you may be also eligible for these programs. And we want it to be all available in the My Colorado app so that you get notifications about new programs that you might qualify for based on maybe an application that you filled out last year for even an electric vehicle rebate, right? And so this is a conversation that we're having. It's obviously very complex, but we are looking at ways that we can make that easier for people to be informed about.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I just submitted an interim committee request, kind of dealing with this, of dealing like if you enter, if you're trying to get public benefits and you're going through this system, how that's connected to other parts of the system so that it would flag like I do this all the time. It's Rep Parenti and I've just shortened it to Representi. That's just what I call her now. But so that you are getting flagged when you're having a touch point in this area, that it's showing you, how this program might benefit you or not. And it's not where we need it to be. But I'm hopeful. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Some of that, just so you're aware, there's also some legal limitations, like Department of Revenue is not allowed to share its information. HIPAA's, some of the healthcare stuff not allowed to be shared. So there's probably ways to get around that with some opt-outs and things like that, but we just, there's different hurdles that have to be overcome.
Yeah. Deb, I see your hand up. Oops, Deb, you're muted. I'm sorry.
I thought I knocked it off. Sorry about that. I wondered if either Representative Parenti or Lindsay is involved with the construction defects law at all, the bill at all, or know what's happening with that.
Parenti, kick it. I mean, Parenti, this is her jam. She's great on this issue.
So I'm the prime sponsor of the other construction defects bill, which is House Bill 1230, which I don't like to call the construction defects bill because to me, it's not about construction defects, it's about warranties and honoring your warranties. It's consumer protection bill. But it certainly gets framed as a counter to Senate Bill 106, which is the construction defects bill. That bill passed the Senate last week. We are waiting to find out which House committee it is going to be assigned to. In fact, let me see if it's been assigned yet. We were expecting that to happen earlier this afternoon. I will say that it was heavily amended in the Senate to take out many parts that our Senate colleagues found really unpalatable. I will tell you that there are more amendments that we want to see as it comes through the House, particularly in my mind around this language about injuries and injuries having to be imminent and unreasonable, which is like in and of itself is a totally unreasonable thing to say. But
That is a very odd phrase.
it really is. I'm like, are you joking? Like this, what is an unreasonable risk of bodily injury? I live in this place. I live in this place. So, but I will say, because I think it's important, to acknowledge that the bill sponsors have taken a lot of amendments, and that's really good. And I will say that the two bills that we're talking about can actually live side by side. There's nothing in direct conflict between them. And so we've been encouraging people to keep that in mind and not frame them as being in contrast to each other. And I do think that both bills are trying to do the same thing, which is keep more of these cases out of the courts. We don't want this to have to go to legislation. We want builders to honor their warranties, right? And in doing so, to repair homes or condos or whatever it is. And so, yes, sure, right to repair. I'm not concerned about right to repair. I'm concerned about obligation to repair.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll see. It looks like it hasn't been assigned to a House committee yet. So there's a couple of options on the table for sure. Obviously, we would love to see it come to transportation, housing, and local government. I suspect it will go to a slightly more, I'm gonna use a word, balanced committee.
Business friendly.
You know, perhaps judiciary or even business affairs, but there's lots of different options on the table and we'll just have to see.
Parenti, does that bill have another House sponsor? I only see Byrd on it as of now. Is it just?
I think officially, Representative Byrd is the only House sponsor. I do know that there are a number of co-sponsors, but I don't know that another prime sponsor has been named.
And just as a warning, I have to leave in 8 minutes. We have a call scheduled, so I will hop off then. Just to give you some warning.
We'll miss you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Joe has her hand up.
Yes, I was looking in the chat and I just wanted to make sure that our speakers knew that you got thanked by Mindy Moore. She says, thanks to Representative Parenti and Representative Lindsay. I am a renter directly affected by many of the concerns you are addressing, including rent fixing by our landlord using RealPage software.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to make sure you saw that.
No, thank you. I did see that and hate to see that members of our community have been, you know, negatively impacted. And also it's reaffirming to know that this is a real issue. This is a real issue. We knew that, but it's also good to hear it from members of the community.
That's right. Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. So Representative Parenti and Representative Lindsay, I'm going to say thank you very much for giving of your time this evening to bring us this important update, and we certainly appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating on behalf of all the people in Colorado. So thank you for your time, and we will continue to follow your work. And if there's anything the league can do, be sure to reach out to us as well.
Thank you so much to all of you for the invitation. Thank you for the work that you do as an old Common Cause employee. I love the league. I appreciate, you know, our partnership with you and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and thanks for all the work that you all do. It's all part and parcel of getting the work done here. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
So yeah,
Bye, everybody.
let you drop off. But before the rest of us drop off, does anyone else have any housing news or any other updates that they want to share with the group? I have two things, so I'll jump in here. I'm sure many of you knew that the Larimer County housing team had a housing forum last week. And I just want to let you know that the video of that forum is available on our website if you're interested in watching. The focus of it was, the title was Skyrocketing Housing Prices, Why? So it was delving into the whole pricing issue around housing across Colorado. So if you're interested in watching that, it's available as of today. Yeah. And I also want to let you know that I was part of a phone conversation with the assistant city manager in Steamboat Springs around the defeat of the ballot issue to annex the land for affordable housing. His indication was they're going back to the drawing board and that they would be in a pretty good spot by next fall to be able to come to one of our meetings and talk to us about the whole project with the Housing Authority and Steamboat and what they're wanting to do. So we're looking to get them in September, hopefully. And I'm thinking, am I reading this group right, that you'd be interested in hearing from them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. And the next meeting, May, Andrea had indicated that she has a contact with Urban Peak to update us on their new housing campus, dealing with youth housing and homelessness. Is that something you'd like to pursue for the month of May? To get an update from Urban Peak?
Sure.
Okay, and I could also bring in, Larimer County has a project that involves a partnership with the Loveland and Fort Collins school districts, along with Matthew House in Fort Collins, that's providing the region an exclusive shelter for homeless youth that's being planned, and that's working with youth ages 15 to 20. So I thought maybe
Awesome.
we could bring the two of those groups together just to get an idea of what's being done in the state for our youth and housing.
That's great.
All right, so that's May, and unless anyone else has anything to add, I think we can part our ways for tonight. Kathy, Kate, and Joe, thank you for everything you're doing, because I know how busy you are right now.
Well, we miss you.
Oh,
And are very grateful for the job you do heading up this task force. You
Oh,
do an
wow.
awesome job, and I'm really grateful for you.
we'll just keep on moving forward. But yeah, the Housing Task Force is just really important to bring the issues that there are so many that we're dealing with in Colorado. So we'll keep working on them. So with that, we'll say goodnight for
Thanks,
tonight and keep up the good work, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.